Before we dive in, I've got a quick question for you. Where are you watching from right now, and what time is it? Drop it in the comments. I love seeing how far and wide our viewers are tuning in. Now, imagine this. Saitama, the board, suddenly enters the Jujutsu Kaisen universe. What happens next? Let's find out. The night over Shibuya is already wrong. Not chaotic in the usual sense, not loud with panic or screams, but heavy, like the air itself is holding its breath. A newly manifested special-grade curse stretches across multiple blocks, its form unstable, flickering between grotesque shapes as cursed energy floods the streets. Grade 1 sorcerers are struggling just to stay upright. Barriers crack under pressure. Even seasoned fighters can feel it. This curse isn't just strong, it's hungry, adapting in real time, learning from every attack thrown at it. Somewhere above it all, Satoru Gojo watches, blindfolded eyes fixed on the distortion in space. Yet something else catches his attention, something that shouldn't exist here at all. There's a sudden pressure drop, not cursed energy, not killing intent, nothing that should register to a sorcerer's senses. And yet everyone feels it. A man appears on the edge of the battlefield, standing in the middle of broken asphalt like he took a wrong turn on his evening walk. Bald head, plain yellow suit, red gloves hanging loosely at his sides. Saitama looks around, squints at the destruction, and lets out a quiet sigh, already annoyed. He asks a simple question, almost lost in the chaos. Why does everyone here look so tense? The curse reacts instantly. It doesn't hesitate, doesn't analyze, doesn't wait. Tendrils of cursed flesh lash out, layered with techniques meant to shred both body and soul. Sorcerers shout warnings, instinctively bracing for impact. By every rule of Jujutsu, this man should be erased on contact. He has no cursed energy, no reinforcement, no defense. But when the attack lands, something impossible happens. The curse's strike doesn't connect the way it should. Not because it missed, but because the technique fails to recognize Saitama as a valid target. The impact disperses like smoke hitting a wall. Saitama blinks, looking down at his glove, mildly confused. Around him, the curse recoils, its form stuttering, cursed energy surging erratically as if the world itself just rejected its existence. Gojo's expression shifts. For the first time, it isn't confidence or amusement. It's curiosity edged with something sharper. Because what just entered this battlefield doesn't break the rules of Jujutsu. It stands completely outside them. The curse doesn't retreat. It can't. Special-grade entities are born from obsession and fear, and this one has just encountered something it cannot comprehend. Its mass swells, buildings bending inward as cursed energy condenses into a pseudo-domain. The air screams as invisible pressure clamps down on everything inside the radius. Sorcerers collapse to one knee. Concrete liquefies. This isn't a full domain expansion, but it's close enough to kill anyone caught inside without Gojo's protection. Saitama, meanwhile, looks around, annoyed that the ground feels uneven under his boots. Inside the distortion, the curse rewrites its attack pattern. Instead of targeting the body, it aims for existence itself, flooding the area with layered techniques meant to crush, slice, and erase anything classified as alive. This is how curses deal with anomalies. This is how they survive. The logic is simple. If it exists, it can be destroyed. But once again, the techniques fail. Not violently, not explosively. They just stop. Like a computer encountering a command it was never programmed to execute. Saitama scratches the back of his head as fragments of cursed energy slide off him like rain. He doesn't feel pressure. He doesn't feel danger. He feels inconvenienced. He takes a step forward, and the pseudo-domain trembles. Not because of force, but because something inside it just violated its core assumption. Distance collapses. Space ripples. The curse screams, not in pain, but in error. Its form warping as its adaptive instincts overload. Gojo steps in closer, infinity active by reflex, but even he doesn't interfere. He's watching something unprecedented unfold. Saitama isn't resisting the curse. He isn't countering it with some unknown technique. He's simply present, and that presence is destabilizing the battlefield. The curse hurls its entire mass at him in a final desperate attempt to overwhelm the anomaly through sheer volume. Skyscraper-sized limbs crash down, eclipsing the street in darkness. The impact sends a shockwave across Shibuya, shattering windows and flattening everything in its path. When the dust clears, Saitama is still standing. His cape flutters lazily behind him. He looks up at the towering curse, finally frowning. Not in fear, in disappointment, because for all its build-up, for all its spectacle, it still hasn't managed to do anything interesting. He raises a fist. No stance, no tension, no build-up of power. Just a casual motion, as if swatting a mosquito that's been buzzing too close for too long. Gojo's breath catches. He realizes, in that split second, that this isn't an exorcism about to happen. This is erasure. The punch lands without ceremony. There's no flash of cursed light, no shockwave designed for spectacle, no violent distortion of space. It's almost quiet. The curse doesn't explode or scatter. It compresses, collapsing inward as if reality itself just decided it no longer needed to accommodate its existence. In a fraction of a second, the special-grade curse is gone. Not purified, not sealed. Gone in a way that leaves behind no residual cursed energy, no trace, no data to analyze. The space it occupied feels unnaturally clean, like a stain wiped from the world rather than a battle concluded. Silence spreads across the battlefield. Sorcerers who survived can't even process what they're seeing. Their instincts scream that something catastrophic should have happened, that such an overwhelming release of force should have torn the city apart. But Shibuya still stands. The street is cracked beneath Saitama's feet, but the destruction stops there, as if the punch obeyed rules of restraint that no sorcerer ever learned. Saitama lowers his arm and sighs, already bored again. He glances around, disappointed, and mutters that he was hoping this one might last longer than a second. Gojo doesn't speak right away. His 6 eyes scan the area automatically, searching for cursed remnants, energy signatures, anything that could explain what just occurred. There's nothing. No flow, no echo. It's as if the curse never existed in the first place. That's what unsettles him most. Even the strongest exorcisms leave scars on the world. This left none. For the first time in his life, Gojo realizes he's witnessing a form of power that doesn't interact with cursed energy at all. It doesn't negate it. It doesn't dominate it. It ignores it completely. The surviving sorcerers exchange uneasy glances. Whispers spread. Who is he? Is he a cursed tool? A heavenly restriction taken to an impossible extreme? A god wearing human skin? None of the theories stick because all of them rely on jujutsu logic, and jujutsu logic has just failed them. Saitama stretches his shoulders, unimpressed by the stunned silence, and asks if that was supposed to be a big deal. No one answers. No one knows how. Far above, the balance of the city shifts. Curses that were forming in nearby districts falter, their manifestations destabilizing as if something fundamental has changed. Fear still exists. Hatred still exists. But the ecosystem of curses has just encountered a variable it cannot adapt to. An anomaly that doesn't scale, doesn't evolve, and doesn't escalate. It simply ends things. Gojo finally breaks the silence, his voice calm but careful. He doesn't introduce himself. He doesn't threaten. He asks a single question, one sorcerer to another, even though he already suspects the answer won't fit his world. What are you? Saitama blinks, confused by the sudden attention, and shrugs. He says he's just a guy who's a hero for fun. That answer should mean nothing. Instead, it sends a chill through everyone listening, because if that's true, then the foundations of the Jujutsu Kaisen universe have just been shaken by someone who doesn't even take this world seriously. And somewhere deep within the fabric of cursed existence, something ancient begins to take notice. The moment stretches, heavy with implications no one wants to voice. Gojo studies Saitama in silence, 6 eyes still searching for depth, for layers, for some hidden system he can map and understand. There is none. Saitama's presence is flat in the most terrifying way possible, like a wall with no cracks. Not infinite, not overwhelming, simply absolute. Gojo has faced gods, monsters, and calamities disguised as people, but this is different. Those things fit somewhere in the hierarchy. This man does not. Around them, the city begins to recover from shock. Emergency barriers stabilize. Sorcerers regroup, still shaken, still whispering. Reports flood in from across Tokyo of curses abruptly destabilizing. Some dissolving mid-formation, others failing to manifest at all. It's as if the natural pressure that fuels their birth has been disrupted. The system is recalculating, struggling to account for a variable that wasn't supposed to exist. Saitama, oblivious to the ripple effect, pulls out his phone and checks the time, irritated that he's probably missing a supermarket sale. Gojo finally speaks again, this time with a hint of humor masking genuine caution. He suggests moving somewhere quieter. Not as an order, as a request. Saitama shrugs and agrees, mostly because the street is dusty and the vibe feels off. As they walk, sorcerers instinctively make space for him, bodies reacting before their minds can catch up. No cursed presence has ever commanded this kind of silent respect without trying. High above, beyond the reach of barriers and human awareness, something stirs. A presence bound by ancient vows and engraved arrogance senses the disturbance like a thorn under the skin. Sukuna doesn't see Saitama yet, but he feels the afterimage of that punch echoing through the cursed world. Not as fearful, as an insult. Something has erased a special-grade curse without acknowledging the hierarchy that defines power itself. That alone is enough to earn his interest. Back on the ground, Gojo realizes the truth before anyone else dares to articulate it. Saitama isn't a threat because he's hostile. He's a threat because he's indifferent. A man who can end calamities without intent, without effort, without consequence. The Jujutsu world is built on fear, balance, and escalation. Saitama disrupts all three just by existing. If he stays, curses won't just be hunted, they'll become obsolete. Saitama stops walking and looks around, mildly annoyed again. He asks if there's anyone here who's actually strong, because so far this place has been kind of a letdown. Gojo smiles behind his blindfold, but it's a tight smile, edged with uncertainty, because for the first time, the strongest sorcerer alive doesn't know whether introducing Saitama to the top of this world will save it, or break it beyond repair. And as the night settles over Shibuya once more, the Jujutsu Kaisen universe quietly crosses a line it can never uncross. The morning after the Shibuya incident, the city still smells of ozone and scorched concrete. Rumors spread like wildfire. An unstoppable man had arrived, a being who erased a special-grade curse without any ritual, any jujutsu, or even a hint of effort. Sorcerers from all over Tokyo are mobilizing, trying to grasp what just happened, some out of curiosity, some out of fear. Meanwhile, Saitama wanders casually through the streets, groceries in hand, still mildly bored, completely oblivious to the chaos his presence is causing. From his perspective, it's just another day, another city with a little more excitement than usual. He's looking for a sale on detergent, completely unaware that the ecosystem of curses has begun to warp in response to him. Curses sense him immediately, drawn like moths to a flame. Unlike ordinary humans, they do not fear him. They react instinctively, recognizing a presence that violates the natural order. A mid-grade curse erupts in a nearby alley, attempting a layered curse technique designed to test and overwhelm any opponent. Multiple energy tendrils, each infused with destructive intent, coil through the air, aiming to slice, pierce, and crush simultaneously. Sorcerers on the scene hold their breath, expecting a massacre. But Saitama is already standing in the path, completely still, observing the attack with mild annoyance. The moment the curse strikes, the techniques behave as if hitting an invisible wall. The energy tendrils stall mid-air, trembling, twisting upon themselves in impossible angles before dropping harmlessly to the ground. The curse screeches, its form flickering violently, trying to adapt, to recalculate, to survive. Every instinct it has screams that this man should die, yet nothing happens. Saitama, unimpressed, steps forward and flicks one of the tendrils with his finger. It shatters like glass. The other curses, watching from a distance, hesitate. Some retreat instinctively, sensing that their strategies may no longer apply. Gojo appears beside Saitama, his infinity activated automatically, still studying this phenomenon with his usual casual curiosity masking a rare trace of genuine concern. He remarks quietly, noting that Saitama doesn't just ignore cursed energy. He rewrites its interaction with reality entirely. There is no resistance, no negation, no absorption. The curse does not collide with Saitama. It ceases to exist as a threat the instant he acknowledges it. Gojo, for the first time, realizes that Saitama doesn't even operate on the same plane as sorcery. Techniques designed to dismantle life, to exploit weaknesses, to manipulate cursed energy in any conceivable way, are ineffective. He doesn't need strategy. He doesn't need a reaction. He needs nothing at all. The cursed entity, realizing brute force will not work, tries a more subtle approach. Its form elongates into a grotesque mimicry of a human, attempting psychological warfare, projecting fears and insecurities into the minds of everyone nearby. Sorcerers falter, their vision clouded by illusions tailored to their deepest regrets. Saitama blinks. He does not flinch. He does not ponder. He does not even focus. He simply steps forward, and with a single casual punch, the illusion collapses like a sandcastle against the tide. The curse cries out, not in pain, but in disbelief. Nearby sorcerers are frozen, some whispering in disbelief. This is unprecedented. Even high-level sorcerers, ones who have spent years mastering the manipulation of life and death, cannot comprehend what they are witnessing. Saitama has turned a fight that should have been strategic, drawn out, and terrifying into something mundane. Curses that were supposed to grow stronger in response to fear, desperation, and pain falter as their instinctual algorithms fail repeatedly. Saitama is not just unkillable, he is fundamentally incomprehensible. The impact of one punch is visible not as destruction, but as an unnatural leveling of existence. The alley where the curse techniques converged is intact, yet the curse itself is gone. Its cursed energy scattered into nothingness. The air feels wrong, heavy with the absence of something that should have been there, a void where rules once applied. Gojo's eyes narrow behind his blindfold. He realizes that Saitama's presence is destabilizing more than just curses. It is unraveling the assumptions behind every spell, technique, and ritual ever recorded. Sorcerers begin to gather closer, their curiosity overcoming fear. Some still masked in caution. They whisper among themselves, debating if this man is a tool, a weapon, or some anomaly that defies classification. None of their theories hold. He is neither divine nor cursed, neither ally nor enemy. Saitama is simply a force of existence that does not negotiate with logic. As he casually walks past them, checking the expiration date on a loaf of bread, a large special-grade curse materializes in the plaza ahead. Unlike the previous ones, this one attempts a multi-layered strategy. Domain-like barriers, slicing techniques, energy compression, and even a mimicry of natural laws meant to trap anyone inside. Sorcerers brace for the inevitable, but Saitama sighs and mutters that this one looks a bit more serious. He steps forward, unhurried, his presence alone compressing space around him. The curse lashes out in full force, targeting him from multiple angles simultaneously, attempting to overwhelm him with sheer quantity and precision. Every attack is calculated to exploit weaknesses no one should have, to bend reality itself around the rules of Jujutsu. And yet, the attacks fail one by one. They meet nothing solid, nothing tangible. The curse thrashes, grows, adapts, but each movement is countered not by technique or strategy, but by the simple fact that Saitama's existence overrides the fundamental premise of every attack. Saitama's fist connects once more. There is no fanfare, no explosion of energy, no dramatic lighting. The curse collapses instantly, its form unraveling like threads pulled from a tapestry. The energy dissipates into nothingness, leaving behind a plaza untouched except for the faint echo of impossibility. Sorcerers stand in stunned silence, realizing that everything they thought they understood about power, strength, and curse techniques has been challenged. Not by skill, not by technique, not by intellect, but by a single, bored man who treats the world like a minor inconvenience. Gojo exhales quietly, a rare tension in his shoulders. He acknowledges silently that Saitama is not just beyond jujutsu power. He is beyond the rules themselves. No domain, no curse technique, no layered strategy, no exorcism, no calculation can ever threaten him. And somewhere deep in the back of his mind, Gojo wonders, for the first time, if the arrival of this man is going to save the world or irreversibly break it. Saitama, meanwhile, yawns. He glances at the surrounding sorcerers, frowning slightly as if disappointed that none of them actually put up a fight. He mutters something about how everything here is a little too easy and starts walking toward the next block, leaving behind a field of dissolved curses and a crowd of bewildered experts who cannot decide whether to run, fight, or faint. The balance of the city, the ecosystem of cursed energy, and the very logic of sorcery itself are being rewritten with every casual step he takes. The shadows along the walls twitch as more minor curses hesitate, sensing the disturbance. They don't attack, they do not flee, they are learning, and yet the lesson they are receiving is incomprehensible. Fear itself is being redefined. Every strategy, every calculation, every jujutsu principle is now a suggestion rather than a law. And for Saitama, it's all still just another boring walk through the city, because nothing here, not even the most complex curses, has presented a real challenge. The sorcerers exchange uneasy glances. Gojo steps closer to Saitama, his voice calm but carrying an edge of seriousness. He notes that while the man before him is not hostile, the consequences of his presence ripple far beyond comprehension. If Saitama continues, curses will not just be eliminated, they will collapse in a way the world has never seen, leaving behind an unrecognizable landscape. Saitama tilts his head, glances at Gojo, and asks if that's supposed to be a warning. Gojo merely smiles, carefully considering what to say next, because there is no way to explain a man who defies every framework the Jujutsu Kaisen universe relies on. The streets of Tokyo have begun to shift in response, not from destruction, but from impossibility. Sorcerers, curses, and the very fabric of jujutsu are adjusting to a new constant. Saitama exists, and he is untouchable. The sun climbs higher, but the city feels heavier, almost tense, as if the world itself is holding its breath around Saitama. He strolls through the streets casually, swinging a small shopping bag in one hand, completely indifferent to the fact that the Jujutsu Kaisen ecosystem is unraveling with every step. On the outskirts of the plaza, a cluster of sorcerers gathers, whispering among themselves in urgent tones. Their discussions are frantic, peppered with fear and disbelief. How can a human being nullify every attack without cursed energy? How can a single punch erase curses that should have taken dozens of sorcerers to contain? And most importantly, what does it mean for the balance of their world if someone like this exists here permanently? Curses, sensing this anomaly, begin acting erratically. Lesser-grade curses flee at the faintest hint of Saitama's presence, while mid-grade ones hesitate mid-formation, as though doubting their own instincts. Some attempt attacks, but the results are the same. Tendrils that should tear apart buildings crumble into dust mid-air. Energy spheres meant to explode on impact fizzle and vanish. A few desperate curses even try combining forces, creating complex patterns of layered curse techniques designed to trap him. Saitama glances at them, blinks, and flicks his fingers. The combined attack evaporates instantly, leaving only empty space where chaos should have been. Gojo observes closely, curiosity warring with caution. He notes that Saitama's power doesn't just nullify attacks, it doesn't interact with them at all. This is not resistance. It is not a barrier. It is a complete bypass, a form of existence that ignores the laws of cursed energy entirely. The concept of attack and defense loses meaning in his presence. Gojo's mind races as he considers the implications. Entire domains, centuries of sorcery, even techniques that warp reality itself are meaningless in front of a man who doesn't acknowledge the rules of this universe. Suddenly, a massive special-grade curse emerges from a nearby collapsed building. Its form is horrifying, shifting between monstrous shapes with multiple eyes and jagged limbs. It does not approach cautiously. It strikes immediately, firing a barrage of high-level techniques. Sorcerers brace for impact, expecting the worst. Energy arcs across the street, aiming to obliterate anyone who comes near. Saitama, on the other hand, barely notices. He steps forward, annoyed by the spectacle, and lands a single punch. The punch is quiet, but its effect is catastrophic for the curse. Not in a destructive explosion, but in absolute erasure. Its cursed energy collapses in on itself, its form unraveling at a molecular level as if the universe has simply rejected its existence. The space it occupied feels hollow, unnatural, like the laws that defined it have been erased. Sorcerers stare in stunned silence, unable to comprehend what they've just witnessed. The curse is gone, without a trace, without residual energy, without the dramatic display they've been trained to expect. Even the surviving mid-grade curses hesitate, unsure whether to attack or flee. The ecosystem of curses is being rewritten in real time, every instinctive behavior overridden by an anomaly they cannot process. Saitama sighs, glancing at Gojo, and remarks that this place is starting to feel a bit boring. Gojo masks his concern with a casual shrug, but inside he knows this man's existence is destabilizing everything they rely on. As more curses manifest in the surrounding streets, trying to overwhelm the new threat with quantity and complexity, Saitama continues to move with the same casual indifference. Each attempt to attack him fails instantly. Each layered technique collapses the moment it encounters him. Sorcerers watch helplessly as the world they understand unravels around a single man whose boredom dictates the outcome. The streets are littered with dissolving curses, abandoned structures, and the stunned expressions of those who thought they understood power. Gojo finally speaks quietly to himself as much as to anyone listening. He notes that this isn't about strength, skill, or cursed energy. It's about existence. Saitama is a constant beyond all frameworks, an anomaly that cannot be measured, countered, or contained. The implications ripple through every sorcerer present. If he remains here, the hierarchy that governs their lives, the rules of combat, the balance of curses, even the survival of sorcerers themselves, could be rewritten entirely. Saitama pauses near the center of the plaza, scanning the dissolving remnants of another special-grade curse. He mutters that it's still not challenging enough, and continues his aimless stroll. The city, once a chaotic battlefield of cursed energy, now feels strangely silent, almost tense, as if the air itself is waiting to see what he will do next. Sorcerers whisper among themselves, exchanging theories, fears, and guesses. None of their ideas hold weight. None of their training prepares them for a being who does not acknowledge the rules of their universe. And as the mid-morning sun illuminates Shibuya, it becomes clear to everyone witnessing this. Saitama is not just unkillable. He is incomprehensible. Every attack, every curse, every strategy fails before him. The Jujutsu Kaisen universe is encountering a force that doesn't follow its logic, doesn't respect its rules, and cannot be contained by any means known to humankind or sorcery. The world feels smaller in his presence, not because of the size of his attacks, but because the rules that govern existence are bending or breaking around him. Saitama sighs, finally glancing at the horizon as if considering leaving. He mutters that maybe the next city over will be more interesting, more in line with what he's looking for. Sorcerers realize with growing dread and awe that the moment he walks away, the impact will not fade. The ecosystem of curses, The logic of techniques and the very fabric of the jujutsu world has been irrevocably altered by a single bored man. The question everyone now faces is no longer whether he can be stopped. It is whether the world itself can survive his presence. The echoes of erasure ripple through the streets, lingering in the air like a warning. Curses that were once feared now hesitate before manifesting. Sorcerers train themselves to anticipate the impossible, yet none of their preparations can meet the reality of Saitama's existence. Even Gojo, the strongest alive, steps back momentarily, contemplating that he may have never truly understood the scale of power outside his own domain. And Saitama, still bored, continues walking, each step quietly reshaping the rules of the universe around him. The city holds its breath, and the world begins to whisper a single, unsettling truth. In the presence of Saitama, curses are meaningless, techniques are irrelevant, and even the strongest sorcerers are spectators to a force that refuses to play by any rules. The balance has shifted. The hierarchy has crumbled. And the Jujutsu Kaisen universe is only beginning to understand the threat, or the anomaly, that walks among them. The tension in the city grows, but it isn't fear of destruction in the usual sense. There's no sound of screams, no fiery explosions tearing apart the streets. The fear is subtle, existential. Sorcerers and curses alike are realizing that the rules which governed every fight, every strategy, every survival instinct have been shattered. The concept of threat itself is being rewritten. A special grade curse materializes on the rooftop of a nearby skyscraper, attempting to exert control over its environment, manipulating gravity and energy to trap Saitama in a pseudo-domain. Every attack is precise, every motion calculated to overwhelm anyone caught inside. Yet as Saitama casually steps forward, brushing dust off his shoulder, the pseudo-domain begins to falter. The curse's careful calculations collapse under the weight of an unpredictable constant that refuses to engage with them on their terms. The sorcerers watch, half in awe, half in horror, as Saitama doesn't even acknowledge the attacks in the conventional sense. He doesn't dodge, he doesn't counter, he doesn't need to. He simply walks, and the cursed techniques unravel automatically, like thread pulled from a tapestry too fragile to hold together. Tendrils of cursed energy collapse midair. Barriers disintegrate without a sound. Spells that took years to master and should have been lethal become irrelevant, and the curse itself begins to twist in confusion, attempting patterns that have never failed before. Gojo's eyes narrow behind his blindfold, the faintest line of tension forming across his face. He recognizes what the rest of the sorcerers are too shocked to articulate. Saitama doesn't just ignore cursed techniques, he invalidates them entirely. He isn't reacting to the world is reacting to him. A force beyond comprehension has entered a universe that measures everything in energy, strategy, and survival. Every attack that should have been devastating simply ceases to matter. He exists outside the logic of curses, outside the hierarchy that governs sorcerers and monsters alike. The special grade curse, desperate and intelligent beyond measure, tries something different. It projects an intricate illusion, one designed to trap Saitama's mind instead of his body, to make him feel fear, pain, hesitation, memories of failure, endless torment, the crushing weight of loss and inevitability. They all flood into his awareness, attempting psychological warfare. Sorcerers tense, expecting a reaction that will confirm his vulnerability. But Saitama simply blinks, mildly irritated, and punches the illusion. The entire projection collapses instantly, leaving no trace, no echo, no lingering energy. The curse shrieks, not in agony, but in disbelief, its very existence challenged by the absurdity of a being who doesn't acknowledge its rules. Nearby sorcerers, watching in frozen awe, begin to understand that conventional metrics of strength, experience, and cursed energy mean nothing here. A single man has reduced what should have been an overwhelming, multi-layered battle to a triviality. He walks calmly, untouched by attacks that should have dismembered, shattered, and annihilated him. Every step he takes erases a fragment of the system the world relies on. Every punch, casual in execution, redefines the parameters of survival. Even the lowest-grade curses hesitate, unsure how to proceed, while mid- and high-grade entities falter, their instincts confused, and their adaptive strategies rendered irrelevant. Gojo finally speaks, his voice measured but carrying the weight of disbelief. He remarks that Saitama doesn't just bypass cursed energy. He fundamentally ignores it. He isn't strong or fast or skilled in any way measurable by the rules of Jujutsu. He is a constant outside those rules, a singular force that makes the most sophisticated techniques meaningless. The implications ripple through the gathered sorcerers. The world they know, the hierarchy of curses, the balance of energy, the concept of threat itself, is collapsing before their eyes, rewritten with each casual movement of a bald man in a yellow suit. Even the environment reacts. Side streets tremble as if sensing the disturbance. Buildings shudder under the strain of curses trying and failing to manifest. Energy patterns twist and disband mid-air, failing to stabilize. Every attack that should have been fatal is reduced to nothing. The air itself feels heavier, tense with impossibility. Saitama stops briefly, tilting his head at a particularly complex attack that tried to surround him with a spiral of deadly energy. He frowns slightly, muttering that it's not very interesting, and walks forward. The attack disintegrates the moment he moves, the curse's layered techniques failing to connect in any meaningful way. Sorcerers exchange grim glances. What they are witnessing cannot be countered, predicted, or explained. Their world has a new constant, one that is untouchable, incomprehensible, and utterly indifferent. The city grows quiet in the aftermath. Curses are dissolving before forming. Sorcerers are paralyzed with the realization that Saitama doesn't engage in battle, he simply ends it. Gojo observes silently, recognizing that the existence of this man represents more than an unbeatable opponent. He is a force that will rewrite the rules entirely, and no one, not even the strongest in the world of Jujutsu, can predict the consequences of his presence. Saitama resumes walking through Shibuya, groceries in hand, each step leaving behind a subtle but undeniable reshaping of reality. Even special-grade curses pause, as if consulting some instinctual system that no longer provides answers. The balance of cursed energy is in flux. The city, the sorcerers, and even the very rules of Jujutsu are reacting to a force they cannot understand. The whispers among the sorcerers grow tense and urgent. He is not just unkillable, he is incomprehensible. Gojo, now walking alongside him, notes silently that if Saitama continues, entire strategies, entire hierarchies, and even the logic of survival for sorcerers could collapse. Yet Saitama seems oblivious, bored, searching for the next source of mild excitement. The Jujutsu Kaisen universe is facing a reality it was never designed to handle, and as the streets settle into an uneasy calm, it becomes terrifyingly clear. Saitama is not just a visitor. He is a force of change, and nothing in this world is prepared to deal with his existence. The city's atmosphere shifts again as the mid-morning light filters through Shibuya's cracked skyline. It's not the usual chaos left behind after a curse attack. There are no bodies, no shattered barriers, no lingering energy flares. Instead, there's an unnatural calm, a tense silence, as if the very fabric of the Jujutsu world is holding its breath, struggling to reconcile what has just occurred. Sorcerers and curses alike are unnerved, sensing a force that operates entirely outside the known rules of combat and survival. Saitama walks slowly, checking his phone for the next sale, oblivious to the growing dread in the air around him. The world is adapting, but every adaptation fails because the anomaly at its center refuses to cooperate with logic, strategy, or expectation. A massive special-grade curse appears suddenly, towering over the plaza like a living skyscraper, its form constantly shifting and writhing. Its limbs are long, sharp, and grotesque, each infused with complex cursed techniques designed to crush anyone in its path. Sorcerers brace, expecting the worst, calculating escape routes, and preparing to intervene. But Saitama doesn't flinch, doesn't react, and doesn't even look at it with interest. His presence alone disrupts the curse's instincts. The entity's attacks, perfectly coordinated in theory, fail to land, failing to acknowledge him as a valid target. Even when it tries to combine spatial manipulation, energy compression, and slicing techniques into a single, devastating strike, the attack collapses as though reality itself refuses to comply. Gojo steps closer, infinity active, watching with a mix of fascination and concern. He realizes that this is not a case of overwhelming power or mastery of cursed energy. This is an existential mismatch. The strongest sorcerer in history cannot measure, cannot predict, and cannot challenge Saitama using any known principles. The anomaly is absolute, a man whose very existence overrides the logic of the universe around him. Sorcerers whisper nervously to one another, debating whether Saitama is a weapon, a god, or something far stranger. Every theory is invalid. None of them fit. He is simply there, and the rules that govern everything else have no bearing on him. The curse, growing desperate, tries to overwhelm him with sheer quantity, unleashing layered attacks that would have obliterated an entire platoon of sorcerers. Each tendril, each blast of energy, each spatial distortion is precisely designed to target perceived weaknesses, adaptively responding to Saitama's movements, or so it thinks, and yet every strike collapses instantly the moment it encounters him. The air vibrates with unfulfilled energy. The ground quakes not from impact, but from the systemic failure of curses trying to operate under assumptions that no longer hold. Saitama finally lifts his arm, not in a battle-ready stance, but in a casual, bored gesture, and delivers a single punch. There is no dramatic energy buildup, no destructive shockwave. The cursed entity simply unravels, its complex form disintegrating in a way that leaves no trace of cursed energy behind. The plaza, once tense with potential violence, now feels unnaturally empty. Sorcerers gape in disbelief. Special-grade curses that should have taken decades to counter vanish in a single motion, leaving the ecosystem of curses fundamentally destabilized. Even the lesser-grade curses are affected, hesitating before forming, unsure if they can even manifest. The rules that allowed them to exist, grow, and strike have been quietly rewritten in the presence of Saitama. Gojo's eyes narrow. He understands the implication. This man does not just erase curses. He erases the relevance of their very principles. Strategy, energy, adaptation, hierarchy, all meaningless in the face of a being who does not operate under their laws. Saitama continues walking, the boredom in his posture unbroken. He passes by shattered illusions, dissolved attacks, and trembling sorcerers, unconcerned with the disruption he leaves behind. He mutters occasionally about how this is still too easy, still not interesting enough to warrant his effort. The Jujutsu Kaisen universe, meanwhile, struggles to recalibrate. The ecosystem of curses, the expectations of sorcerers, and the very logic of their techniques are all failing. Survival instincts falter. Hierarchies crumble. The strongest spells are rendered obsolete in the face of absolute indifference. Gojo stays by his side, silent now, weighing the consequences. He knows that Saitama is not a threat in the traditional sense. He is not here to kill, to conquer, or to dominate. But his mere presence is reshaping the world, eroding centuries of rules, destabilizing the foundations of power, and introducing variables that cannot be contained. Sorcerers exchange panicked glances, realizing that the anomaly before them is no longer just another opponent. It is a new reality. As Saitama moves through the streets, curses hesitate, sorcerers brace, and the city holds its breath. Nothing in the known world can predict his next action. Every casual step he takes quietly rewrites the balance of power. The implications are profound. The ecosystem of curses is breaking down. The rules of jujutsu are failing. and the strongest sorcerers are mere spectators to a force that refuses to play by any rules. Saitama's presence is a fundamental disruption, an unstoppable constant that challenges the very logic of existence itself. And as the plaza settles into a tense, uneasy calm, it becomes clear to everyone witnessing this. Saitama is not just beyond power or strength. He is beyond comprehension, beyond consequence, and beyond the very structure of the Jujutsu Kaisen universe. The world can no longer operate under its old rules, and for Saitama, it is still just another day, a mundane walk through a city that cannot challenge him, a world where nothing matters except what he decides it does. The tension that had been simmering across Shibuya reaches a new level as the sun climbs higher. Sorcerers are scattered, still in shock from witnessing curses dissolve like mist before Saitama's casual approach. The city feels almost wrong, the air heavy with an unnatural quiet, as if reality itself is holding its breath, unsure of what comes next. Gojo stands at the center of the plaza, blindfolded in place, infinity active, observing Saitama with a mix of curiosity, caution, and the tiniest hint of concern. This is not just a man who has erased special-grade curses with a single punch. This is an anomaly that makes the rules of Jujutsu irrelevant, a being so incomprehensible that even Gojo, who has seen gods and monsters, feels the weight of genuine uncertainty pressing down. Saitama, indifferent as always, yawns and stretches, looking around at the remnants of dissipated curses and fractured illusions. He mutters that the city feels a little too quiet, that nothing here is interesting enough yet, and he starts walking again. Gojo steps forward, his movements measured but deliberate. He needs to understand, to test, to see the limits of this anomaly before it becomes impossible to contain. Infinity hums faintly, a protective aura surrounding him, not in anticipation of attack, but as a safeguard against the unknowable. He calls out to Saitama, curious whether this man, who bends the rules of existence itself, will even acknowledge him. Saitama glances at Gojo briefly, unimpressed, and asks what the point of all the staring is. Gojo smiles faintly behind his blindfold, noting that he has no intention of harming this man. He only wants to understand the nature of the force standing before him, the entity that can erase curses, ignore techniques, and destabilize the world without effort or thought. The plaza becomes the stage for an encounter that is not a battle in the conventional sense, but a confrontation between two fundamentally different paradigms of power. Gojo activates infinity fully, creating a space between them where nothing can pass, a sphere of absolute control designed to test limits. The air ripples as Gojo's domain manifests subtly, the energy patterns almost imperceptible yet undeniable. Saitama steps forward, ignoring the field entirely, his expression unchanged. The space between them seems to stretch and contract, but it has no effect on him. He does not slow down. He does not resist. He does not counter. He simply continues, and the infinity field adjusts around him, failing to interact in any meaningful way. Gojo frowns for the first time in decades, realizing that this man is not only unconcerned with the rules of cursed energy, but may be operating on an entirely separate plane of existence. Saitama's casual steps send subtle ripples through the air, small, almost imperceptible distortions that make the surrounding sorcerers uneasy. Every instinct they have screams that something is wrong, that this is not just a confrontation but a fundamental shift in how power interacts with the world. Gojo tests further, activating small portions of his technique, trying repulsion, attraction, spatial compression, anything that should influence movement or perception. None of it matters. Saitama's presence renders every calculation obsolete. The concepts of distance, velocity, and resistance have no meaning for him. He exists outside these parameters entirely, and every strike, every manipulation Gojo attempts passes through him as if he were a ghost occupying the space between reality and concept. The surrounding sorcerers are frozen, watching intently, their fear mingled with awe. Gojo realizes that what he is seeing is not merely strength. It is the impossibility of interaction. Saitama is a man who cannot be measured, who cannot be contained, and whose existence makes the foundation of sorcery itself seem trivial. He does not respond to intimidation, strategy, or power projection. He does not need to. He simply exists, and the world reacts, or fails to react, accordingly. Saitama tilts his head slightly, curious for the first time, and mutters that the space feels funny, like someone's trying too hard to be clever. Gojo nods subtly, testing again. He reaches for a small expansion of infinity, creating a more pronounced field intended to physically repel any movement toward him. Saitama doesn't stop. He walks right into the barrier, his body unmoved, unaffected, unremarkable. Gojo observes carefully as the energy field interacts with nothing, the equations he has relied upon for centuries failing to produce results. This is no longer a test of strength. It is a test of understanding. A ripple passes through the plaza as Saitama takes another step. Gojo feels it in his body, a subtle but undeniable shift in the laws around him. He realizes fully that Saitama does not negate power or attack. He ignores them. He bypasses them entirely. Infinity cannot touch him, techniques cannot influence him, and analysis cannot define him. The strongest sorcerer alive is confronted not by an enemy, but by a force that cannot be contextualized within the framework of the universe he knows. The city seems to pause. Birds hover mid-flight. The air itself feels taut, stretched between comprehension and impossibility. Sorcerers exchange whispers of disbelief. Every technique, every layered attack, every domain, every principle of cursed energy is meaningless here. Gojo acknowledges silently that Saitama is not a threat in the conventional sense. He is a constant beyond threat, a presence beyond interaction. The confrontation is a paradox, two forces in the same space, one seeking to understand, the other oblivious. And yet the tension is palpable, a magnetic pull between the known and the unknowable. Saitama finally stops, scratching the back of his head. He looks at Gojo and asks in a flat tone whether this is supposed to be a fight. Gojo smiles faintly, realizing that no matter what he attempts, there will be no fight in the traditional sense. Every calculation fails, every prediction collapses, and every plan is nullified simply by the fact that Saitama exists as he does. He is untouchable, unmeasurable, and entirely indifferent. And that indifference is reshaping the understanding of power for everyone present. The surrounding sorcerers hold their breath. Gojo takes a step back, his posture casual but his mind racing. He knows that he cannot defeat Saitama, cannot restrict him, and cannot even properly evaluate him. He is the first to acknowledge this reality openly. Saitama operates outside the rules of Jujutsu entirely. And yet, despite the impossibility of the situation, Gojo's curiosity grows. He wants to see what happens if he pushes further, if he tests the boundaries of a man without limits. Saitama glances at him again, clearly mildly irritated that Gojo is still making a show of testing him. He sighs, muttering that maybe this is slightly more interesting than the last city, but not by much. The energy around them hums, subtle but pervasive, as if the universe itself is stretching to accommodate the impossibility of this encounter. Every sorcerer nearby realizes that this is more than a confrontation. This is a fundamental lesson. The strongest techniques, the most complex strategies, and even the highest levels of cursed energy are irrelevant in the face of a being who cannot be touched, cannot be measured, and cannot be opposed by any conventional means. And as Gojo studies Saitama, fully aware that he is facing an anomaly that cannot be confined, a thought forms in his mind, sharp and undeniable. No matter how strong he is, no matter what techniques he possesses, Saitama is beyond limits, beyond comprehension, and perhaps beyond even his own understanding. The world has changed in an instant, and Gojo senses that the consequences of this encounter will ripple far beyond the plaza, far beyond Shibuya, and far beyond anything anyone has seen before. Gojo steps back slightly, the faint hum of infinity still surrounding him as he assesses the anomaly in front of him. Every instinct honed over decades of fighting gods, monsters, and curses tells him to act, to push, to probe limits, but nothing in his experience applies here. Saitama doesn't respond to threats, doesn't react to intimidation, doesn't abide by the rules of jujutsu or physics or strategy. Gojo tests again, this time extending his infinity to a wider area, attempting to manipulate the space around Saitama, compressing distance and warping angles. Normally, even the cleverest opponents would find themselves trapped, slowed, or pushed back. But Saitama walks through it effortlessly, his steps unaltered, his expression flat, his focus on how uneven the pavement feels under his boots. Around them, the city's atmosphere reacts in subtle but perceptible ways. Curses in the surrounding streets hesitate, their formations collapsing mid-thought as if sensing that the parameters of their existence have been rewritten. Lesser-grade curses vanish without warning, no longer recognizing their own instincts as valid. Mid-grade curses attempt attacks, only for each strike to fail before it can reach Saitama. Even the residual energy from previous battles seems to dissipate unnaturally, leaving an eerie calm over the plaza. Sorcerers watch, mouths agape, struggling to comprehend what they are seeing. Some whisper, trying to rationalize it as a trick, an illusion, or an anomaly they can study. But instinctively, they know that this is something far beyond their comprehension. Gojo observes quietly, activating small portions of his techniques to probe further. He tests repulsion, attraction, slight distortions of gravity, manipulations of distance, and even subtle energy compressions, all designed to measure a being who should not be measurable. And yet each test fails. Each attempt passes through Saitama as if he were occupying the space between reality and concept, untouched, unaffected, and indifferent. Infinity cannot repel him. Techniques cannot bind him. Even perception struggles to register him as a conventional entity. He exists outside every framework the Jujutsu Kaisen universe uses to define power, influence, and survival. Saitama notices the faint adjustments Gojo makes and tilts his head slightly, asking casually whether this is a game or a test. Gojo smiles, though it's tight and carries a weight he doesn't often show. He admits silently to himself that he is curious, not to defeat, not to dominate, but to understand something that cannot be understood. Every punch, every curse, every domain has failed to reach this man. Even infinity, which he has relied upon as both shield and observation tool, interacts with him as though it were nothing more than air. The city seems to acknowledge the impossibility of the encounter. Birds hover in mid-air as if unsure of gravity. Dust hangs motionless in the sunlight. A few minor curses attempt to approach only to recoil instinctively, their instincts screaming that something fundamental about existence has been altered. Sorcerers hold their positions, realizing that they are witnessing a phenomenon that transcends conventional power structures. Saitama is not simply unbeatable. He is incomprehensible, a force that makes hierarchies irrelevant, strategies meaningless, and even the strongest practitioners powerless to engage in any predictable way. Gojo steps closer, narrowing the gap, trying to provoke some reaction, some response, even a flicker of recognition. He tests again, pushing the limits of spatial manipulation, extending infinity's domain into more complex distortions. Saitama steps forward, brushing invisible dust from his shoulder, and walks straight through it. There is no resistance, no tension, no acknowledgement. Gojo frowns behind his blindfold, his curiosity deepening. He realizes that the anomaly before him does not negate power. It exists outside it. Every rule he has relied on, every calculation, every principle of combat is nullified simply by the fact that Saitama exists. The surrounding sorcerers begin to murmur nervously. This is more than strength. This is a fundamental disruption. Even the smallest curse hesitates, mid-grade entities falter, and the framework that governs all sorcery is being quietly rewritten. Saitama's casual indifference, his mundane motions, are reshaping the battlefield not through force, but by the simple assertion of his existence. Gojo recognizes the paradox fully. He is the strongest alive, yet here he is confronted with a being whose strength cannot be measured, opposed, or even truly acknowledged. Saitama stops for a moment, tilting his head as he looks at Gojo. He mutters casually that the space feels funny, like someone is trying too hard to impress him. Gojo smiles faintly, but inwardly acknowledges a truth that is both exhilarating and terrifying. No matter what techniques he deploys, no matter how much spatial manipulation or infinite barriers he creates, Saitama will not interact with them in the expected way. He is untouchable, but not through conventional means. He is untouchable because he transcends the concept of touch, attack, and limitation itself. The plaza around them grows still. The ambient energy of the city, the latent cursed energy from previous battles, and even the physical architecture of the streets seem to bend subtly under the weight of the encounter. Sorcerers whisper in disbelief, their training and instincts failing to offer any guidance. Gojo realizes that the next steps will not be a fight in the traditional sense. He cannot challenge Saitama as he would any other opponent. There is no victory, no defeat, no measurement of skill. There is only observation of a man who exists outside all rules, a force of indifference that redefines the meaning of power, technique, and survival. Saitama sighs, stretches, and continues walking, each step quiet but heavy with consequence. Gojo follows, silent now, absorbing every detail. Every curse that had formed in response to him collapses before forming. Every strategy fails before it can be executed. And even the strongest techniques in existence, the cumulative knowledge of centuries of sorcery, are meaningless against him. Gojo understands fully. He is in the presence of a man without limits, a being whose very existence challenges the foundation of the universe. The surrounding sorcerers begin to grasp the implications. This is not a battle. It is not even a confrontation. It is a paradigm shift, a quiet but absolute rewriting of the rules by a force that operates entirely outside them. And as Saitama moves onward, completely indifferent to the attention he commands, the city, the curses, and the practitioners alike are forced to recognize the same terrifying truth. He is untouchable, incomprehensible, and beyond the limits of everything they know. The plaza seems almost unreal now, suspended between tension and impossibility. Even minor curses that had been hovering around hesitate, sensing the anomaly of Saitama's presence. They try to gather, trying to assess a threat they cannot measure, but instinct and logic both fail them. Mid-grade curses attempt simple attacks, but each strike collapses the instant it approaches. Energy that should have sliced through concrete dissipates mid-air. Tendrils of cursed energy that should coil and strike instead dissolve before connecting. Every manifestation is disrupted, but not destroyed. Saitama doesn't destroy. He bypasses. He exists outside the rules that govern existence, and the rules themselves seem to recognize their inadequacy. Gojo studies him, every fiber of his being alert. He activates a larger portion of infinity, pushing his limits to see if Saitama can be affected at all. Normally, even the strongest curse techniques can interact with infinity to some extent. The slightest touch should create tension, feedback, or resistance. But Saitama steps forward casually, and the expanded field does not even register his presence. His feet disturb nothing. The air bends subtly around him, but without resistance, without reaction, without acknowledgement. Gojo realizes something he has never admitted even to himself. This is not an opponent that can be measured or countered. It is a constant, a variable outside all equations. Saitama glances at Gojo, raising one brow in mild curiosity. He asks casually whether this is a fight or just some kind of demonstration. Gojo's lips twitch in a faint smile, masking the tension he feels internally. He knows that no words can convey the nature of Saitama's existence. No technique can force him to react in the expected way. No attack, no domain, No cursed energy, no calculation can engage him. And yet the thought of probing this man further, of understanding even a fragment of his impossible nature, is irresistible. He decides to escalate cautiously, to test just how far the limits can stretch without provoking catastrophe. He extends infinity once more, but this time layers it with subtle manipulations of space and energy compression. The surrounding sorcerers flinch instinctively, expecting a dramatic clash, a pulse of energy that would shake the plaza. But nothing happens. Saitama's casual step forward is unaffected. Every barrier, every subtle distortion, every manipulation fails to register. Gojo's mind races as he realizes fully what he is facing. A man who cannot be opposed because he cannot be acknowledged as a conventional entity. Every rule, every law, every expectation fails simultaneously. Saitama shrugs and mutters that the space feels a little tight, as if someone is trying too hard. It is a faint acknowledgement, but nothing more. Gojo studies this, intrigued and frustrated at once. He realizes that this man does not engage in combat because he is invincible. He does not even acknowledge combat as a relevant concept. Saitama exists as a principle, a constant, an anomaly that makes strategy, technique, and hierarchy meaningless. The Jujutsu Kaisen universe is operating under rules that have been invalidated simply by his presence. Around them, curses hesitate, retreat, and vanish in increasing numbers. The very ecosystem of cursed energy is recalibrating instinctively, struggling to account for an agent it cannot influence, cannot harm, and cannot understand. Sorcerers murmur among themselves, voices trembling. Every calculation they have relied upon fails to account for what they are witnessing. Even Gojo, whose experience dwarfs that of everyone present, feels a rare and profound uncertainty. He knows he cannot fight this man, cannot stop him, and cannot fully understand him. He can only observe, cautious, fascinated, and aware that the implications of this encounter will echo far beyond the plaza, far beyond Shibuya, and far beyond anything in his understanding. Saitama continues walking slowly, seemingly bored, looking around the city with mild interest. He glances at Gojo, asking if there's anyone here who's actually strong. Gojo smiles faintly, realizing that no answer will convey the true scale of the man in front of him. Saitama is not just unkillable. He is beyond measurement, beyond strategy, and beyond limitation. His presence is already reshaping the balance of power, rewriting the rules by which curses form and sorcery operate, and challenging the very framework of existence in this universe. The city itself reacts subtly. Buildings feel heavier, as if bracing for an impact that never comes. Shadows stretch and bend unnaturally. Even minor curses hesitate mid-formation. Sorcerers feel the shift, instinctively understanding that nothing they have ever learned applies here. Every technique they attempt, every calculation, every expectation is meaningless. Saitama has altered the playing field simply by walking across it, and the consequences will be long-lasting. Gojo finally speaks, his voice calm but carrying weight. He admits to himself and to the observing sorcerers that Saitama cannot be opposed through conventional means. He cannot be contained, measured, or harmed. He is a man without limits, and every step he takes demonstrates that existence itself defers to his presence. Saitama sighs, stretches, and continues walking, utterly indifferent to the tension, the anticipation, and the fear that radiates from every sorcerer around him. The plaza remains in a surreal stillness, the ecosystem of curses recalibrating, and Gojo silently acknowledges the terrifying and awe-inspiring reality. This encounter is not a fight. It is a study of impossibility, a lesson in the nature of power that defies comprehension, and a reminder that some forces cannot be engaged. They can only be witnessed. The sun glints off Saitama's bald head as he walks, the shadows of Shibuya stretching unnaturally around him. Every curse that tries to rise hesitates. Every sorcerer watching feels the weight of a truth they cannot articulate. No technique, no strategy, No accumulation of cursed energy matters here. The strongest man alive, the indestructible, incomparable Saitama, exists as a force beyond limits, beyond rules, and beyond understanding. Gojo follows silently, intrigued, cautious, and profoundly aware that the implications of Saitama's presence will echo throughout the universe in ways no one can predict. The air in Shibuya grows still, but not in the way of calm before a storm. It is heavier, charged with tension that cannot be measured. Sorcerers linger in the shadows, frozen in awe, their instincts screaming that the world they know is no longer fully theirs to interpret. Even minor curses hesitate, flickering in and out of existence as if uncertain whether to manifest at all. Mid-grade curses, which should be confident enough to attack in numbers, attempt formations and coordinated strikes, only to collapse the moment Saitama moves. The universe is failing to recognize him as a target because he is not bound by its rules, not limited by energy, technique, or intention. He exists outside them entirely. Gojo studies him carefully, every sense alert, aware that he is witnessing a phenomenon beyond calculation. He tests infinity again, pushing the spatial distortions to their most extreme configurations. Normally, even the cleverest opponents would be forced to react, their movements slowed or redirected. Yet Saitama moves through the manipulations without hesitation or notice, the barriers folding harmlessly around him. Gojo feels a rare sense of unease. This is not resistance, not invulnerability, not adaptation. This is a being who operates on a plane where conventional laws of combat, energy, and even physics hold no sway. The strongest techniques in his arsenal are irrelevant because Saitama does not engage with them on any meaningful level. The plaza feels almost surreal now. Birds hover mid-air, unsure of gravity. Dust hangs unnaturally. The faint hum of latent cursed energy seems to waver as if recognizing its own futility. Sorcerers murmur, trying to rationalize what they are witnessing. Some whisper that Saitama must be a divine anomaly, a being outside the hierarchy of curses and humans. Others suggest he is some kind of uncontrollable variable, a force that can neither be predicted nor confined. And yet all realize the same terrifying truth. There is no framework in the Jujutsu Kaisen universe capable of measuring or countering him. Saitama tilts his head slightly, observing Gojo's attempts to manipulate space around him. He mutters casually that the fields feel strange, like someone is trying too hard. Gojo allows himself a faint smile, internally acknowledging that no explanation, no threat, no gesture will provoke a conventional reaction. Every principle of strategy and power collapses in the presence of a man who does not even recognize combat as a meaningful concept. The city reacts subtly to his passage. Buildings tremble ever so slightly, not from impact, but from the sheer presence of a force that bypasses expectation. Shadows stretch and twist unnaturally, and the ambient energy of the area becomes taut, strained by the impossibility of his existence. Minor curses collapse mid-formation, unable to reconcile instinct with reality. Mid-grade and even some special-grade curses attempt coordinated attacks, but the strikes fail the instant Saitama approaches, unable to register him as a valid target. Gojo observes silently, recognizing a deeper truth. Saitama doesn't merely ignore infinity, he transcends it. He does not negate attacks, he does not deflect energy, and he does not react in kind. He simply exists, a constant outside the parameters of comprehension. Every step Saitama takes destabilizes the ecosystem of curses and the hierarchy of sorcery alike. The strongest techniques, the most elaborate strategies, the cumulative knowledge of centuries of jujutsu, all meaningless in the presence of a man whose limits do not exist. Saitama finally pauses in the center of the plaza. He looks at Gojo and asks plainly if this is supposed to be a fight or just a demonstration of skill. Gojo smiles faintly, a rare mix of amusement and concern in his eyes. He knows that no answer will adequately convey the scale of Saitama's existence. Saitama is not just unkillable. He is beyond measurement, beyond opposition, and beyond any conventional understanding of strength. His presence challenges the very logic that governs life, combat, and survival in the Jujutsu Kaisen universe. The surrounding sorcerers exchange fearful glances. Every instinct, every training, every principle that once guided them has been rendered meaningless. Saitama has transformed the battlefield into a space where rules do not apply, a stage where even the most powerful cannot measure or influence him. The realization spreads through them like a cold wind. They are witnessing a force beyond limits, and no framework exists to engage it. Gojo steps forward slightly, curious, cautious, and aware of the profound implications. He realizes that the encounter is not a battle in any traditional sense. Saitama cannot be opposed, contained, or harmed by conventional means. The plaza, the city, the ecosystem of curses, and the very principles of Jujutsu itself are all reacting to his presence. Gojo knows that Saitama's arrival has irrevocably altered the landscape of power. Every action, every step, every casual gesture is redefining the rules of the universe, leaving a trail of impossibility in its wake. Saitama sighs, stretches casually, and begins walking again. He is indifferent to the tension, to the anticipation, to the fear radiating from every sorcerer nearby. Yet with each step, the city, the curses, and even the strongest sorcerers feel the weight of his presence. Gojo follows, silent and thoughtful, fully aware that they are witnessing something that defies all understanding. Saitama is untouchable, incomprehensible, and beyond the limits of everything the Jujutsu Kaisen universe has ever known. The shadows lengthen over Shibuya, but the plaza remains suspended in a quiet, tense stillness. Curses hesitate, sorcerers remain on edge, and the rules of the world have been rewritten quietly but irrevocably. Saitama moves forward, unbothered, mundane, and completely indifferent, demonstrating that the most terrifying power does not roar. It simply exists, immutable and absolute, and challenges everything else to catch up. Before we dive in, imagine the scene shifting as a new presence makes itself known. The city that had grown quiet in Saitama's indifferent wake now quivers under an energy far older, far more malevolent. Sukuna, the king of curses, senses the anomaly that is Saitama from his sliver of existence within Yuji Itadori. He smirks, his interest piqued. For centuries, he has encountered humans, sorcerers, and even other curses who thought themselves untouchable. None have inspired the slightest flicker of genuine curiosity. And yet, this bald man, this so-called hero, disrupts curses, sorcerers, and the very rules of existence with such casual ease that Sukuna cannot ignore him. The energy radiating from Sukuna's presence is oppressive. Buildings tremble as if acknowledging an apex predator has arrived. The air thickens with cursed energy, a stifling, malevolent force that bends perception and instinct alike. Sorcerers in the area falter, some bowing instinctively in reverence, others gripping weapons they know are useless. But Sukuna's gaze is fixed solely on Saitama. He is intrigued not by a challenge, but by the anomaly itself, the audacity of a man who exists outside fear, power, and consequence. The king of curses senses an instinctive truth. This is no ordinary human, no mere sorcerer, and certainly no being that can be measured by strength, technique, or cunning. Saitama, as usual, remains unaware of the full scope of the energy approaching. He notices only a subtle tension in the air, a heaviness that makes the hair on his arm stand slightly. He glances around lazily, muttering that something feels off, but doesn't give it much thought. To him, the city remains slightly boring, still not challenging enough. Sukuna, however, is not content to let indifference dictate events. He manifests fully, his presence a ripple of terrifying authority, his aura radiating the kind of fear and power that can crush even the most confident sorcerers. The sorcerers nearby instinctively take cover, some whispering prayers, others attempting to suppress the panic rising in their chests. They recognize Sukuna's energy as one that can annihilate multiple special-grade curses at once without effort. And yet there is an unfamiliar hesitation in Sukuna, a crack in his otherwise absolute confidence. Saitama, oblivious, continues to walk through the streets, seemingly unaffected by the presence of a being whose power has toppled entire cities and crushed centuries of human ambition. Sukuna watches with interest sharpened by instinct and centuries of dominance. Here is a being who does not acknowledge fear, power, or technique. Sukuna decides to engage not out of necessity, but curiosity. He manifests a slash of his own cursed technique, a strike designed to test the limits of reality, a force that would obliterate any human sorcerer or curse without hesitation. Energy tears through the plaza, shifting air, crumbling concrete, and distorting the space around it. Sorcerers watching from a distance expect a display of absolute destruction, but Saitama, as always, is unimpressed. He glances at the attack, blinks once, and casually steps aside, the energy dissipating without even grazing him. The King of Curses frowns slightly, intrigued and irritated in equal measure. Sukuna leans in mentally, probing the bald man's presence, trying to sense his limits, his cursed energy, anything that might reveal a vulnerability. But there is nothing. Saitama radiates nothing detectable by Sukuna's centuries of experience. No fluctuation in energy, no intent, no threat. It is as if he is a constant in the universe, unaffected by the ebb and flow of curses and sorcery. Sukuna's curiosity transforms into fascination. He has never encountered a being who cannot be measured, cannot be influenced, and cannot be provoked by power alone. Sukuna steps fully into the plaza now, his aura pressing down like the weight of a collapsing sky. Sorcerers are frozen, watching helplessly as the King of Curses manifests his full form, an overwhelming display of malevolent energy that warps the streets around him. Every instinct screams that Saitama should be reacting, that the human should at least acknowledge the most terrifying cursed being in existence. Yet Saitama yawns, checking his phone briefly, unconcerned with the palpable threat radiating from Sukuna. The contrast between Sukuna's deliberate malice and Saitama's casual indifference is almost surreal. Sukuna narrows his eyes, his smirk broadening. Here is a man who does not fear him, who does not respect his power, and who refuses to engage in combat in any conventional sense. Sukuna's centuries of arrogance and mastery over death, energy, and fear meet a singular, immovable force. Someone who operates entirely outside the laws of the world Sukuna knows. The King of Curses leans forward, intrigued not by combat but by the existential impossibility of Saitama's existence. Nearby, sorcerers whisper frantically among themselves, unable to comprehend the dynamics unfolding before them. Sukuna, the terror that has haunted humanity for centuries, is now genuinely curious. This bald man, this simple-looking hero, does not fit the framework of power, threat, or strategy. And Saitama, oblivious as always, continues walking through Shibuya with casual steps, his mundane gaze fixed somewhere beyond concern, beyond fear, beyond expectation. Sukuna begins testing the waters further. He projects multiple techniques simultaneously, combining slashes, energy waves, and spatial distortions, a display designed to overwhelm the senses and break the body. The plaza quakes, and the air itself seems to shiver under the sheer potency of the attacks, yet Saitama remains unaffected. He sidesteps slightly, his expression unchanged. Energy that should have annihilated him disperses without effect. Sukuna's interest deepens. This is not boredom. This is fascination mingled with frustration. Here is a being who challenges centuries of understanding with every casual movement, who makes the impossible look trivial, and who refuses to engage on any level that Sukuna has ever known. The King of Curses takes a step closer, the ground cracking under his energy, and unleashes a flurry designed to test Saitama's speed, reaction, and perception. To every observer, it seems as though the bald man should be overwhelmed. Every strike is calculated, precise, and destructive. And yet Saitama moves with the same mundane rhythm, brushing imaginary dust off his shoulder as if none of it even matters. Sukuna's eyes narrow, a mixture of irritation and intrigue sharpening his already dangerous focus. Saitama glances at Sukuna briefly and mutters casually that this guy feels strong but kind of annoying. He yawns, stretching slightly, unconcerned by the energy that warps the streets around him. Sukuna's smirk twitches, his centuries of dominance challenged not by strength, but by a complete refusal to acknowledge threat. The King of Curses realizes fully that this is not a man to fight in any traditional sense. Saitama cannot be measured, cannot be contained, and cannot be influenced by fear, power, or technique. Sukuna leans forward slightly, intrigued beyond measure. The surrounding sorcerers are frozen, unable to comprehend what they are witnessing. Sukuna, centuries of terror and power incarnate, has met a being who exists outside all rules and for the first time in history is compelled to study, to probe, to understand rather than destroy. The air hums with impossible tension, a silent acknowledgement that the balance of power in this universe is shifting. Saitama continues his casual walk, seemingly oblivious, while Sukuna's curiosity grows into a dangerous, almost obsessive interest. And as the streets of Shibuya hold their collective breath, it becomes clear. The King of Curses has found something he cannot crush, something that defies centuries of understanding, and something that might, in ways he cannot yet admit, intrigue him more than any human or curse before. Saitama, the unmovable constant, continues onward, reshaping reality with his indifference, while Sukuna's gaze sharpens, intent now not on victory, but on comprehension, fascination, and perhaps the first real challenge to his centuries of superiority. Sukuna hovers over the plaza like a storm about to break, his aura radiating oppressive malice and power. The city feels the weight of his presence, the streets trembling beneath the sheer magnitude of his cursed energy. Every sorcerer in the area instinctively drops into defensive stances, feeling the shift in the air as if gravity itself had bent. And yet, Saitama remains entirely unconcerned. He continues walking through the plaza with the same casual gait, muttering about how nothing in the city has been interesting enough yet. To him, Sukuna's presence is merely an annoyance, a slight disturbance in his otherwise mundane day. The contrast between them is jarring. Sukuna's centuries of domination, his reputation as a force capable of annihilating entire cities, cannot provoke so much as a flinch. The King of Curses manifests another wave of attacks, this time more intricate, designed to test every aspect of Saitama. Speed, perception, reflex, and even instinct. Each strike is precise, lethal, and meticulously calculated. Sorcerers hold their breath, expecting the bald man to show some response, to finally reveal a weakness. But Saitama sidesteps lazily, brushing an invisible speck of dust off his shoulder. Every attack that should have torn him apart instead dissolves harmlessly, leaving Sukuna more intrigued than enraged. Sukuna leans forward mentally, probing Saitama's presence, seeking the smallest fluctuation, the slightest hint of energy, technique, or intention. But there is nothing. No cursed energy to sense, no malice to trigger instinct, no reaction to provoke. Saitama exists as a constant, a singular force outside the rules of the universe. Every strategy, every layered attack, every intricate curse that Sukuna has perfected over centuries proves meaningless against someone who refuses to acknowledge them. The King of Curses' curiosity sharpens into obsession. This is not a being to conquer. This is a phenomenon to study, to understand, perhaps for the first time in his long, violent existence. Nearby sorcerers whisper frantically, trying to interpret the unfolding scene. The strongest curse in existence, the one feared for centuries, has encountered someone who not only does not fear him, but cannot even be measured by his senses. The implications are staggering. Techniques that once guaranteed victory are useless. Domains, manipulations, and attacks that required centuries to master fail instantly. Sukuna is forced to acknowledge a truth that most in the world will never confront. There exists a man whose very presence defies the most fundamental laws of sorcery. Sukuna shifts his energy into a more aggressive display, his aura flaring violently, capable of crushing even the most prepared sorcerers in moments. He unleashes an assault combining spatial distortions, energy blades, and multi-layered cursed techniques. The plaza becomes a chaotic spectacle for any ordinary human observer, with air bending, concrete cracking, and energy arcs slicing the atmosphere. Sorcerers shield their eyes, expecting an unstoppable display of annihilation. And yet, Saitama walks through it as though nothing exists. He sidesteps slightly, his expression bored, and the attacks unravel harmlessly in his wake. Sukuna's fascination grows. He has never encountered a being so utterly indifferent to power and threat. Sukuna leans closer, testing Saitama further. He combines his cursed techniques, creating a strike meant to overwhelm both body and mind. The air shatters with energy. The city quivers under the sheer force, yet Saitama, casual as ever, simply tilts his head to the side and continues walking. Sukuna's frown deepens, his centuries of experience failing to provoke even a flicker of response. There is no strategy that works. No energy can touch him. No malice can influence him. This bald man is a living paradox, a force that nullifies centuries of perfected technique with nothing more than indifference. The surrounding sorcerers are frozen in disbelief. They witness the impossible. Sukuna, the king of curses, frustrated and fascinated, unable to affect a single hair on Saitama's head. The city itself seems to recognize the anomaly. Buildings tremble, air warps subtly, and even minor curses falter before forming, sensing a presence that operates outside every known law. Sukuna's curiosity transforms into a dangerous obsession. He has faced countless humans, countless sorcerers, countless curses, yet none have ever provoked this level of interest. Saitama is not merely unkillable, he is incomprehensible. Sukuna steps fully into the plaza, his aura reaching an intensity that bends perception. He studies Saitama, his centuries of malice tempered by genuine curiosity. Here is a being who cannot be threatened, cannot be measured, and cannot be influenced. A man whose existence defies the very principles Sukuna has spent lifetimes mastering. Saitama, as always, remains oblivious, his mundane gaze surveying the city as though nothing remarkable is happening. Sukuna smirks, a mixture of frustration and fascination lighting his eyes. He realizes fully that this is not a conventional battle. Saitama is not an opponent to conquer, but an anomaly to observe. Every casual step the bald man takes undermines centuries of dominance. Every indifferent glance nullifies centuries of expectation. Sukuna leans forward slightly, intrigued beyond measure, determined to understand the man who exists outside limits, a force that defies everything he has ever known. The plaza holds its breath. Sorcerers watch, frozen and awed. Curses hesitate mid-formation. The king of curses, centuries of terror and supremacy incarnate, is forced to admit what no other being has ever forced him to acknowledge. Saitama is untouchable, unmeasurable, and utterly indifferent to the forces of fear, power, and death. The encounter is no longer a fight, it is a revelation. And as Saitama continues his casual walk, the city and everyone within it sense the undeniable truth. Sukuna's centuries of mastery are irrelevant. The king of curses is fascinated not by the threat, but by the sheer impossibility of Saitama's existence. Every step he takes reshapes the balance of power. Every breath he exudes challenges centuries of assumptions, and the king of curses, for the first time in history, is compelled to observe, learn, and perhaps wonder at a force that refuses to be touched, opposed, or understood. Sukuna leans back slightly, his centuries of arrogance and dominance giving way to a rare sense of intrigue. He has faced humans and curses who believed themselves untouchable, beings who wielded immense power with precision and intent. Yet none have ever provoked such fascination. Saitama does not react in fear, does not attempt to dominate, and does not even acknowledge the implicit challenge Sukuna represents. He simply exists, a constant beyond threat, beyond measurement, and beyond comprehension. The King of Curses tilts his head, a grin spreading across his face. Here is something different, something that refuses to operate under any rules, a being whose very presence mocks centuries of accumulated strength and fear. The surrounding sorcerers tremble, their instincts screaming that the encounter they are witnessing defies everything they have been taught. Every curse that attempts to rise hesitates mid-formation, sensing the anomaly radiating from Saitama. Mid-grade curses that should attack with precision and confidence falter, their strikes unraveling before reaching him. Even the residual energy from previous battles seems to dissipate unnaturally in his wake. Saitama has not even exerted effort, yet the ecosystem of curses and sorcery itself is quietly realigning to accommodate his existence. Sukuna's fascination deepens into a dangerous curiosity. He manifests more aggressively now, his aura expanding and twisting with malevolent energy. He tests Saitama with a barrage of slashes, energy waves, and spatial manipulations, designed not merely to harm but to overwhelm the senses, challenge perception, and push limits. The plaza quakes under the combined power, concrete cracking and energy arcs slicing through the atmosphere. Sorcerers nearby shield their eyes, anticipating catastrophic destruction. Yet Saitama moves through it effortlessly, sidestepping with casual motions that render the attacks meaningless. The energy dissipates around him as if it had no target, and Sukuna feels a twinge of frustration mixed with admiration. He leans in mentally, probing the bald man's presence, trying to detect the faintest fluctuation in energy or intent. There is nothing, no cursed energy, no aggression, no malice, no fear. Sukuna, for all his centuries of cunning and observation, cannot find a foothold. Saitama exists outside the principles that define his power, and that reality fascinates the King of Curses more than any fight ever could. Every attempt to provoke a response fails. Every strategy, every technique, every layered curse collapses into irrelevance in the face of this indifference. Saitama finally glances at Sukuna, expression flat, muttering casually that the guy feels strong but not very interesting. The words, casual as they are, carry an existential weight that Sukuna has never experienced. He has destroyed cities, crushed sorcerers, and ruled over curses with absolute authority, yet here is a man who refuses to acknowledge threat or power. Sukuna's smirk falters for the briefest instant, replaced by genuine intrigue. He has met a being who cannot be threatened, cannot be provoked, and cannot be measured by centuries of accumulated skill and knowledge. The surrounding sorcerers are awestruck, their fear mingled with disbelief. They witness the impossible. The King of Curses, an entity of unimaginable power, observing a single human with a level of fascination he has never shown before. The rules that govern combat, strength, and survival in this universe are meaningless here. Saitama does not need to fight to dominate. He simply exists, and his existence rewrites the expectations of everyone who witnesses it. Sukuna leans forward, energy coiling around him like serpents ready to strike. He unleashes a flurry designed to overwhelm every human and sorcerer present. Combining slashes, crushing energy waves, and spatial distortions meant to confine and destroy. The plaza becomes a maelstrom of energy, concrete shattering, air tearing, and light warping under the sheer intensity of the assault. And yet, Saitama walks calmly through it, brushing imaginary dust from his shoulder. Every attack that should have obliterated him dissolves harmlessly, leaving Sukuna both frustrated and enthralled. Sukuna's centuries of experience tell him that nothing alive can withstand this, without showing effort, without engaging in combat, without exerting power. And yet, here stands a man who refuses all three. Saitama is untouchable, not because of invulnerability or defense, but because he operates outside the concepts of threat and power themselves. Every strike Sukuna hurls is met with a mundane gesture, a sidestep, or nothing at all. And with every passing moment, the King of Curses' curiosity deepens into something almost obsessive. The sorcerers nearby whisper among themselves, struggling to articulate the reality of what they see. Sukuna, centuries of terror incarnate, is compelled not to destroy, but to study. He has never encountered a force so incomprehensible, so utterly indifferent to power, fear, and dominance. And Saitama, oblivious as always, continues walking through the plaza, mundane and unconcerned, reshaping the battlefield with his simple existence. Sukuna studies him, leaning forward slightly, energy coiling, mind sharpening. This is not a fight. There is no strategy, no combat, no expectation of victory or defeat. Saitama exists beyond all of that. The King of Curses, who has faced gods and humans alike, recognizes a new paradigm, a being whose limits cannot be touched, whose actions cannot be predicted, and whose very presence challenges the foundations of centuries of understanding. Every step Saitama takes continues to alter the perception of power in the city. Even minor curses hesitate, unsure if they can manifest, while sorcerers gape in disbelief. Sukuna's fascination intensifies. For the first time he sees not a target, not a threat, but a phenomenon, a force beyond comprehension. And he cannot look away. Sukuna steps fully into the plaza now, his presence so overwhelming that the air itself seems to vibrate with his malevolent energy. Every sorcerer nearby feels the oppressive weight of his cursed aura pressing down, instinctively recognizing that even their most potent techniques are negligible in the face of centuries of unchallenged power. Buildings tremble subtly, concrete cracks, and the very atmosphere seems to distort under his influence. And yet Saitama continues his casual walk, expression bland, utterly unconcerned by the King of Curses' overwhelming presence. The contrast between them could not be more striking. Sukuna, centuries of arrogance, carnage, and mastery condensed into a terrifying form of malevolence, meets a human who does not even acknowledge him as a threat. Saitama is not impressed. He does not flinch, does not measure, does not calculate. Every instinct Sukuna possesses screams that this man should fear him, should attempt to flee, or at least react. And yet Saitama's indifference is absolute. He exists outside fear, outside threat, outside the very parameters Sukuna has spent lifetimes mastering. Sukuna smirks, intrigued. For the first time in centuries, he is compelled to study rather than destroy. He launches a series of complex cursed techniques, overlapping slashes, energy waves, and spatial distortions, designed to test every facet of Saitama's limits. The plaza becomes a storm of energy, air bending and twisting, concrete fracturing, and cursed energy colliding in brilliant, violent arcs. Sorcerers hold their breath, expecting catastrophe. Every attack should overwhelm Saitama. Every strike should at least elicit a response. But he steps through casually, brushing invisible dust from his shoulder. Sukuna's smirk deepens, a mixture of frustration and fascination flickering across his features. Sukuna leans in mentally, attempting to sense any fluctuation in energy, intent, or will. But there is nothing. Saitama radiates no cursed energy, no malice, no threat, no fear. He exists as a constant, entirely unaffected by the laws of the universe Sukuna has known for centuries. Every attempt to provoke him fails. Every strategy, every attack, every calculated effort collapses into irrelevance. Sukuna's centuries of dominance meet a wall of indifference, and for the first time he is intrigued not by conquest, but by the puzzle of Saitama's existence. The surrounding sorcerers are frozen, unable to comprehend the scene unfolding. The most feared curse in history, an entity capable of annihilating the strongest sorcerers with ease, is rendered perplexed, almost mesmerized by a single man who refuses to acknowledge him. Even the ecosystem of minor and mid-grade curses falters, sensing the anomaly that Saitama represents. Every instinct they have is overridden by the impossibility of his existence. Sukuna decides to escalate further. He unleashes a devastating combination of techniques designed to test reaction time, perception, and spatial awareness simultaneously. The plaza quakes under the combined force. Energy arcs slicing the air, concrete splintering, and the atmosphere shimmering with raw cursed power. Every sorcerer presents braces for the inevitable destruction. Yet Saitama sidesteps with casual grace, unbothered, his expression bland. Every attack that should have obliterated him passes harmlessly. Sukuna's fascination intensifies. He has never encountered a being so utterly impervious, not through strength or technique, but through sheer indifference and existence beyond all rules. Sukuna tilts his head, curiosity sharpening. This is not an opponent. It is a phenomenon. Every attack, every cursed technique, every display of power fails to provoke any reaction. Saitama is untouchable because he refuses to exist within the parameters Sukuna can influence. The king of curses, who has crushed entire civilizations and manipulated the dead and living alike, finds himself studying a man who cannot be engaged through conventional methods. Saitama is beyond measure, beyond manipulation, and beyond the reach of centuries of mastery. The air grows tense as Sukuna leans closer, preparing to test Saitama in ways even he has never attempted before. Sorcerers watch in disbelief, realizing that the strongest curse alive is now compelled not to destroy, but to understand. Saitama, still oblivious, continues walking, mundane and indifferent, brushing dust from his shoulders and muttering about how the city feels quiet today. The absurdity of the situation is clear. The king of curses, feared by generations, cannot provoke even a flicker of concern or response. Sukuna's eyes narrow, a dangerous, fascinated glint appearing. He begins to unleash layered techniques of unprecedented complexity designed to overwhelm body, mind, and spirit all at once. Yet Saitama remains unaffected. Every slash, every wave of energy, every spatial distortion unravels before touching him. Sukuna's frustration is tempered by awe. He realizes that Saitama is not merely invincible. He exists outside the very concepts of threat and power that define Sukuna's existence. The city holds its breath as the battle, or rather, the impossibility, unfolds. Sorcerers are frozen, curses hesitate, and even the ambient energy seems to hum in recognition that Saitama is beyond limitation. Sukuna, centuries of terror and dominance incarnate, has met a man who cannot be touched, opposed, or measured. He studies him intently, fascinated by the paradox before him. Saitama's casual steps, his indifference, and his simplicity are rewriting the rules of existence, challenging centuries of understanding and compelling the king of curses to acknowledge something he has never faced before. A man without limits, a force beyond comprehension, and a phenomenon that defies all expectations. The plaza quivers with the weight of their confrontation. Saitama continues walking, oblivious yet reshaping the world around him. Sukuna leans in, energy coiling and ready to probe further, not to dominate, not to destroy, but to understand the impossible. Every sorcerer watching knows they are witnessing history. The king of curses, fascinated and cautious, studying a man who defies all rules, all power, and all expectation. Saitama, the unmovable constant, continues on, completely indifferent, leaving Sukuna and the entire Jujutsu Kaisen universe forced to reckon with the unimaginable. Before we dive in, picture the cityscape of Shibuya stretching out under the fading afternoon sun. Streets cracked from battles, cursed energy hanging thick in the air, and every sorcerer present frozen in awe, fear, and disbelief. Saitama, the bald man whose reputation as the strongest borders on legend even outside his own universe, continues walking with the same casual air he has carried from the moment he entered this world. To him, the chaos around him is barely noticeable, a minor inconvenience at most, a little exercise in patience and timing. The city hums around him, but it is a hum Saitama barely acknowledges. Everything in this universe, every curse, every technique, every domain, is designed to measure, control, or challenge, yet none can even touch him. The Jujutsu Kaisen universe, with all its rules, hierarchies, and lethal consequences, begins to feel insufficient, almost quaint, in the presence of a being who exists outside every boundary. The air vibrates with the weight of impossibility. Sukuna, the king of curses, watches from nearby, his interest sharpened into something rare. Curiosity that cannot be satisfied by aggression. Even Gojo, who has felt himself untouchable for decades, trails Saitama's movements silently, realizing that strength alone cannot define dominance against someone who refuses to exist within the parameters of limitation. Around them, the city itself reacts. Concrete trembles and cracks under the invisible pressure of a presence that bends perception. Curses hesitate mid-formation, and the ambient energy of the world seems to quiver in recognition that a force beyond comprehension is walking through it. Every spell, every technique, every attempt to influence Saitama collapses without effect. He is untouchable, not because of invincibility or reflex, but because the world itself cannot contain him. Sorcerers whisper frantically among themselves, struggling to articulate what they are witnessing. How can one man exist in a system that thrives on measurement, hierarchy, and power? Saitama steps lightly, mundane in his motions, yet every step sends ripples through the ecosystem of cursed energy, destabilizing everything it touches. Even minor curses, which typically strike instinctively, hesitate. Mid-grade curses falter. Special-grade curses recoil without realizing why. The concept of a world with rules, limits, and consequences seems to bend itself around him, unable to exert influence. The strongest techniques, domains, and barriers all fail to register against a presence that does not acknowledge them, rendering centuries of combat mastery meaningless. Saitama pauses at a cracked intersection, glancing at the distant horizon as if considering what to do next. The city holds its breath. Sukuna leans forward, intrigued and cautious, realizing that even his centuries of mastery cannot fully gauge this being. Gojo narrows his eyes behind his blindfold, silently acknowledging that no defense, no matter how perfected, is relevant here. The universe itself seems to whisper a truth too immense for words. Saitama is beyond challenge, beyond threat, and beyond containment. The sheer simplicity of his existence disrupts the systems of power and influence that have defined the world for generations. As he continues walking, the ripple effect becomes more pronounced. Streets that were once orderly crumble slightly under the weight of curses destabilized by his presence. Buildings groan and shift subtly, as if recognizing the futility of containing a force outside every structural and natural law. Sorcerers scramble, attempting to understand or react, to impose control. They cast complex barriers, intricate attacks, and coordinated strategies, but each effort is met with indifference, unacknowledged, and ineffective. Even Sukuna, whose centuries of arrogance and dominance have met nothing short of reverence from most beings, begins to realize that containment, threat, and aggression are meaningless concepts against someone who refuses to operate within the universe's rules. Saitama stops briefly, surveying the remnants of cursed energy lingering in the streets. He mutters under his breath that this place could use a little more excitement, his tone casual, utterly devoid of the tension or anticipation that would grip any ordinary human. And yet, his presence alone reshapes the battlefield. The city, the curses, the sorcerers, even the lingering energy of the world itself, seems to recalibrate instinctively to account for someone who cannot be measured, challenged, or influenced. His very existence is a force of disruption, rewriting expectations, nullifying strategies, and creating a paradigm in which the strongest beings of this universe are powerless to intervene. Gojo follows silently, recognizing the subtle ways Saitama alters reality simply by being present. His infinity, his manipulation of space, and his perception of absolute strength prove irrelevant here. Saitama moves through energy, barriers, and techniques as though they were not even constructed for him. The city trembles, not from destruction, but from the simple fact that a man who refuses to be contained is walking through it. Every curse, every potential threat, every human reaction is recalibrated, destabilized, and forced to acknowledge the impossible. Sukuna, fascinated beyond measure, begins to experiment with layered techniques designed not to destroy, but to probe the limits of Saitama's existence. Multiple slashes, energy manipulations, and cursed domains converge, creating a spectacle of chaos that should overwhelm anyone alive. Sorcerers watch in awe and fear. The ambient energy of the city seems to twist in anticipation of destruction, and yet Saitama continues walking casually, brushing off invisible dust, unbothered, unchallenged, unconcerned. The impossibility of the situation begins to dawn on every observer. This is not a man to fight, contain, or even understand. He is a force the universe itself cannot hold. Saitama's passage through Shibuya becomes a silent declaration. He is beyond combat, beyond technique, beyond the intricate web of rules, power, and consequence that governs this world. Every step reshapes the expectations of sorcerers and curses alike. The strongest being alive, the king of curses, the most untouchable sorcerer, and even the ecosystem of cursed energy are all forced to adjust, recalibrate, and acknowledge that Saitama is untouchable not because of might, but because the very fabric of the world refuses to contain him. Sorcerers feel a rare, almost existential fear. There is no threat to measure, no opponent to confront, no challenge to rise to. Saitama's indifference itself is a force of dominance. The air, the buildings, the lingering cursed energy, and even the minds of the most powerful practitioners are subtly reshaped by his existence. For the first time, the Jujutsu Kaisen universe is encountering a being who cannot be challenged, contained, or understood through any conventional metric. Saitama is not merely the strongest. He is a force beyond rules, beyond threat, beyond measurement, a world that cannot contain him. The city seems suspended, caught in the wake of someone who defies definition. Sukuna studies him with dangerous fascination. Gojo trails silently, and every sorcerer present realizes a truth they have never fully grasped. No technique, no power, and no calculation can define this man. Saitama walks on, mundane, indifferent, and utterly unconcerned, a singular constant that forces the universe itself to bend around him. A world that cannot contain him. A force that transcends every limit it has ever known. The atmosphere in Shibuya grows heavy, charged with a tension that cannot be quantified. Every sorcerer and curse present senses a shift not merely in power, but in reality itself. Saitama walks casually through the streets, his expression neutral, his movements unhurried. And yet every step he takes sends ripples through the very structure of the world. Concrete cracks subtly. Buildings groan, and even the faint remnants of cursed energy left from previous battles seem to shrink and falter as if sensing the futility of resisting him. The laws that govern this universe, both natural and supernatural, bend instinctively around a man who refuses to be constrained. To every observer, it feels like the world itself is yielding to his presence. Gojo trails Saitama, intrigued and cautious, unable to reconcile the mundane posture of this man with the extraordinary phenomenon of his existence. Infinity, his most trusted defense and measure of power, proves irrelevant here. Saitama moves as if untouched by energy fields, cursed techniques, or even spatial manipulation. Gojo can feel the impossible nature of Saitama radiating outward, an energy that is not energy in the conventional sense, but a nullification of expectation itself. The strongest sorcerers, including those who once stood unshakable against special-grade curses, are reduced to observers, powerless to act or predict. The sheer fact of Saitama's existence renders centuries of accumulated knowledge and skill inconsequential. Sukuna hovers nearby, his curiosity now bordering on obsession. He has unleashed techniques that have shattered mountains, razed cities, and crushed the most powerful sorcerers without effort, yet none of it affects Saitama. The king of curses experiments further, layering complex multidimensional attacks meant to test the limits of reaction, perception, and endurance. Every strike, every wave of energy, every folding of space is calculated to overwhelm. Sorcerers watch with bated breath, certain that at least one attack will force Saitama to react. Yet he sidesteps casually, yawning, brushing his hand along an imaginary speck of dust. Sukuna's smirk falters for a fraction of a second, replaced by a dangerous fascination. For the first time in his existence, he is faced with a being whose limits cannot be determined by force, intellect, or fear. The city itself reacts as though alive. The very air seems to hum with the recognition of an anomaly, and even passive objects, the cracked asphalt, abandoned cars, the streetlights, respond subtly to the impossible presence moving through them. Minor curses hesitate mid-formation, unable to manifest fully. Mid-grade and special-grade curses falter, their instincts disrupted by a force they cannot comprehend. Sorcerers attempt layered techniques to suppress or distract him, coordinating barriers, domains, and attacks in elaborate sequences, and yet each effort collapses silently, leaving Saitama unaffected. His indifference alone exerts a dominance that is both absolute and terrifying. Saitama pauses at an intersection, glancing up at a billboard swaying slightly from the residual energy. He mutters casually that this place could use a little more excitement, his voice calm, utterly lacking tension. Despite the ambient chaos, the world bends subtly around him, acknowledging a force it cannot influence. Sukuna studies him intently, recognizing a reality he has never confronted. Saitama is not invincible in the conventional sense, nor is he reacting strategically. He is a constant outside the rules, a phenomenon the universe cannot contain, a man whose very existence invalidates centuries of hierarchy, technique, and expectation. Gojo observes silently, his mind racing. Normally, he is untouchable, capable of bending the battlefield to his will, predicting outcomes, and countering even the most dangerous techniques. Here, however, his mastery is irrelevant. Saitama moves without effort, untouched by cursed energy, domains, or spatial manipulation. Gojo realizes that what he is witnessing is not merely power. It is a redefinition of the concept itself. Saitama cannot be measured, contained, or opposed. He is an immutable force, a singularity in the fabric of this universe, and the world around him subtly adjusts in recognition of that fact. Even Sukuna, centuries of malice and mastery concentrated into a living terror, is compelled to study rather than strike. He unleashes a display of layered, multidimensional curse techniques, each more destructive than the last, yet Saitama remains indifferent. Every attempt to challenge him dissolves in the face of his simple, unbothered existence. The King of Curses begins to understand that this is not an opponent in the conventional sense. This is a force of nature. The implications are profound. The strongest beings in the Jujutsu Kaisen universe, no matter how powerful or cunning, cannot truly confront him. Sorcerers around them remain frozen in awe and fear. Every instinct, every strategy, every calculation fails. Even minor energy flows in the city seem to pause, bending subtly around a being that refuses to be contained. Saitama's casual movements and neutral expression create a surreal tableau, a man whose indifference is more powerful than any technique, whose presence reshapes reality without intent, and whose existence challenges the very framework of the world. Shibuya, the battlefield of countless sorcerers and curses, has become a stage for a phenomenon that cannot be engaged, opposed, or understood. Saitama continues walking, mundane and indifferent, while Sukuna and Gojo follow, both fascinated and cautious. The city reacts, sorcerers hesitate, and curses falter, all forced to acknowledge a singular truth. This world, with all its rules, hierarchy, and lethal systems, cannot contain him. Every step he takes redefines the balance of power. Every breath asserts a dominance unconstrained by technique or fear. Saitama exists beyond the reach of the Jujutsu Kaisen universe, a force whose presence alone challenges centuries of understanding, a man who cannot be opposed, a world that cannot hold him. The streets of Shibuya stretch ahead of Saitama, cracked and scarred from the previous onslaughts of cursed energy and domain expansions, yet nothing truly touches him. Sorcerers who have faced special-grade curses and survived are frozen in a mixture of awe and disbelief. They whisper among themselves, struggling to comprehend the impossible, a man who does not react, who does not strategize, who does not even acknowledge the most terrifying energies around him. Every instinct they have is rendered useless. Every training, every calculation, every attempt to predict outcomes is invalidated by his simple existence. Saitama is not just untouchable, he is fundamentally beyond the scope of understanding in this universe. Sukuna follows closely, his interest deepening into something almost obsessive. He unleashes layered, multidimensional attacks, each more destructive than the last, designed to probe Saitama's speed, perception, and endurance simultaneously. Air tears apart under the force, buildings shudder, and energy arcs light up the atmosphere in violent, brilliant displays. Sorcerers watch, expecting at least a reaction, a movement, a flinch. Yet Saitama steps through casually, unbothered, brushing an invisible speck of dust off his shoulder, as if nothing extraordinary is occurring. Sukuna's curiosity is matched by a rare frustration. He is encountering a being that cannot be challenged, influenced, or even measured by centuries of experience and mastery. The ambient energy of the city bends subtly around him. Minor curses hesitate, mid-grade and special-grade curses falter, and even the residual energy left over from previous fights seems to shrink away from him. The Jujutsu Kaisen universe itself is recalibrating, silently acknowledging a presence that exists outside every framework it has ever known. Saitama's indifference is not weakness. It is a force of its own, reshaping everything in its path simply by being. His movements, mundane and unhurried, carry a quiet dominance that no technique, no calculation, and no curse can counter. Gojo trails silently, his mind racing to reconcile the impossible reality before him. Infinity, his control over space, his unmatched mastery of cursed techniques, none of it matters here. Saitama moves as though untouched by every principle Gojo has relied upon to define strength and dominance. He realizes that what he is witnessing is not merely raw power. It is the redefinition of the concept itself. Saitama exists beyond measurement, beyond opposition, beyond the very rules that have governed combat and survival in this universe. Sukuna intensifies his probing, manifesting a complex display of slashes, energy waves, and spatial distortions designed to overwhelm both body and mind. The plaza becomes a storm of energy, concrete splintering, air tearing, and light bending under the sheer magnitude of the assault. Sorcerers gasp and shield themselves, anticipating catastrophe. And yet, Saitama remains indifferent. Every strike that should have obliterated him passes harmlessly, dissolving as if the universe itself refuses to allow it to make contact. Sukuna's fascination deepens. He has never encountered a being whose limits cannot be discerned by observation, force, or strategy. The city itself seems to respond to Saitama's presence. Buildings sway subtly, streetlights flicker, and ambient cursed energy quivers as if aware that the usual rules no longer apply. Even minor environmental hazards, from falling debris to scattered cursed fragments, move around him or collapse harmlessly, acknowledging the futility of resistance. Sorcerers attempt complex coordinated attacks, hoping that sheer numbers might elicit a reaction. Every attempt fails. Saitama steps through effortlessly, mundane and calm, leaving an invisible trail of impossibility in his wake. The surreal tableau stretches across Shibuya. Sukuna studies him intently, energy coiling, mind sharpening, eyes narrowed in fascination and disbelief. Gojo observes silently, aware that no technique in his arsenal can meaningfully affect this man. Every strategy, every prediction, every instinct fails in the presence of someone who exists entirely outside the framework of the universe. Saitama's casual demeanor belies a force that is absolute, immutable, and beyond measurement. His existence alone is rewriting the rules of power, dominance, and threat in a universe built on combat, cursed energy, and technique. Sorcerers whisper frantically, their understanding of power shattered. Sukuna, centuries of cruelty and mastery incarnate, is compelled to study rather than attack. Gojo, the untouchable, recognizes the truth that this is not a battle that can be fought or won. Minor curses hesitate mid-formation. Mid-grade curses falter, and special-grade curses withdraw instinctively. Even the ambient cursed energy, which normally flows and reacts to intent, bends around Saitama as though recognizing his singular nature. Saitama finally pauses, glancing at the horizon, and mutters that this city still feels a bit quiet. His words, mundane and casual, reverberate across the plaza in a way that underscores the impossibility of the situation. He is untouchable, unmeasurable, and unconcerned. Yet his mere existence disrupts the balance of the world. Every step he takes challenges centuries of expectation, every breath asserts a dominance beyond calculation, and every glance reshapes the perception of power for every observer. Shibuya, once a bustling urban center, has become a stage for a force that cannot be opposed, a world that cannot contain him, and a man who redefines the meaning of strength itself. The King of Curses leans in, intent and focused, no longer attempting to destroy but to understand. Gojo follows silently, aware that this is history in motion, a revelation of force beyond comprehension. Every sorcerer present senses it, the realization that Saitama is untouchable not through defensive technique, strategy, or cursed energy, but through the very fact that he exists outside the rules that bind the universe. The city, the curses, and the most powerful sorcerers are all forced to recalibrate, witnessing a phenomenon that cannot be challenged, a man who cannot be contained, and a force that redefines the very concept of power. Saitama continues forward, his steps deliberate in their casualness, yet every movement sends ripples through the world around him. The streets of Shibuya, once vibrant with the chaos of cursed battles and the bustling energy of sorcerers, now seem almost like a stage set for his singular presence. Buildings tremble under the subtle pressure of his existence. Streetlights sway as though acknowledging that the rules of gravity and energy no longer fully apply, and even lingering curses hesitate in the shadows. Every force in this city, every element of the environment, bends instinctively to a man who refuses to exist within any limit. The impossible has become reality, and the impossible is embodied in Saitama. Sukuna, the King of Curses, follows closely, fascinated to the point of obsession. He unleashes layered attacks, cursed techniques so complex and destructive that they should have obliterated anyone else instantly. Slashes of pure malevolence tear through the air, multidimensional strikes distort space, and energy waves crash with the force to level blocks of the city. Yet Saitama steps through them as though they are air. He brushes invisible dust from his shoulder, yawns slightly, and mutters that the attacks feel a little heavy today. Sukuna's eyes narrow, his centuries of dominance and cruelty unable to provoke the slightest reaction. For the first time, the King of Curses confronts a being whose limits cannot be discerned by aggression, skill, or fear. This is not a man to destroy, it is a force of nature that cannot be contained. Gojo trails silently, a mixture of awe and disbelief written across his expression. His infinity, his mastery over space, his perception of threats and energy flows, none of it has any bearing here. Saitama moves through domains, energy fields, and cursed techniques as though they were irrelevant, untouched, and unconcerned. Gojo senses something he has never felt before: the total erasure of the usual rules. Saitama exists outside the hierarchy of power, beyond technique, and utterly indifferent to threat. No barrier, no manipulation of space, no sorcery can touch him. His existence alone reshapes the understanding of what strength can be. Even the city itself reacts subtly to Saitama's presence. Concrete cracks, glass shimmers, and the residual energy of past battles disperses as though intimidated by his existence. Minor curses falter mid-formation. Mid-grade curses hesitate in fear, and special-grade curses withdraw instinctively. Sorcerers cast coordinated barriers and attack sequences, hoping sheer strategy might provoke some reaction. Every attempt fails. Saitama remains entirely mundane, a man whose presence is a statement more profound than any strike or display of cursed energy. His indifference has become a force of dominance, a phenomenon that cannot be countered. The whispers among sorcerers grow frantic. They realize what is unfolding is not a conventional battle but a complete rewrite of expectation. The king of curses, feared for centuries, cannot provoke him. The strongest sorcerers, unchallenged for decades, cannot predict him. Even the ecosystem of cursed energy, the very lifeblood of their universe, is disrupted, bending and shifting to accommodate a presence it cannot influence. Every observer senses an existential truth. Saitama cannot be contained. He is untouchable, unmeasurable, and unconcerned. Sukuna studies him intently, energy coiling like serpents, fascination sharp as a blade. This is not an opponent, but a phenomenon. Every attempt to provoke a reaction fails. Every strike, every manipulation, every domain is nullified by mere indifference. Sukuna realizes that Saitama exists entirely outside the rules of combat, beyond the reach of technique, and entirely immune to expectation. For the first time, he encounters a force that cannot be dominated, cannot be understood, and cannot be measured. The air itself seems to hum in recognition of Saitama's presence. Buildings, streets, curses, and sorcerers alike adjust instinctively. Even the faint remnants of energy from previous battles shrink away as if acknowledging futility. Saitama's casual movements create a silent assertion of dominance, a truth that no sorcery can counter. He exists beyond limits, and the world must bend to that reality. Every step reshapes the battlefield, every glance shifts the perception of power, and every motion challenges centuries of expectation. The universe is reacting to a singular constant, a man it cannot contain. Saitama finally reaches the heart of the plaza, looking around at the city and muttering that this still isn't exciting enough. His casual demeanor, utterly mundane in contrast to the chaos around him, underscores the absurdity of the situation. He is untouchable, not through defensive technique, not through strategy, not through energy, but because he exists entirely outside the constraints of the world. The strongest beings in the Jujutsu Kaisen universe are forced to acknowledge it. Nothing they have learned, nothing they have mastered, and nothing they can conjure has relevance here. Sukuna leans closer, fascinated and cautious, energy coiling and pulsing with restrained curiosity. Gojo observes silently, understanding that the spectacle before them is not a fight, but a revelation. Minor curses falter, mid-grade curses retreat, and special-grade curses hesitate mid-attack. The city itself seems to pause, holding its breath as it accommodates a being who exists outside its rules. Saitama walks on, mundane, indifferent, yet each step a demonstration of absolute dominance, each breath a recalibration of the universe itself. The Jujutsu Kaisen universe has never encountered someone like him. Every structure, every energy flow, every technique, and every being in the city yields subtly to his presence. Saitama is untouchable, unmeasurable, and unconcerned. He is a force beyond technique, beyond energy, beyond strategy. A man whose very existence reshapes the world, a phenomenon that cannot be contained, opposed, or fully comprehended. The strongest, the cleverest, and the most dangerous beings in the universe follow him with awe, fascination, and a creeping realization. The world itself cannot hold him, and nothing will ever be the same again.